Welcome to another episode of Courageous Me. And I'm so excited today because we've got the beautiful Suzanne Alexander. She's a certified money coach and a money mentor, but that does not capture the essence of what this woman is about. You know, when you're around someone and no matter what's going on or how crazy things are, that person that just brings out a level of calm and peace, that's what this woman is. Like, she's this fiercely go-getting, amazing businesswoman, but she's just this beautiful, soft, kind soul. And oh my goodness, I'm so excited to get in and learn more about the human that you are. So, Suzanne, before we get into my first question, what excites you to have a conversation with me today all about courage?
Look, just to be in the same room with you, Kim, and thank you so much for a gorgeous introduction. I feel like I've just been given the biggest, warmest hug. Um, you know, Part of this conversation today is really to lean into courage and to share this. We met 10 years ago when I was a financial advisor. We both come from finance backgrounds, but it's more than that. It's just, the depth of the conversations that we always have when we do get together, and really just to lean in and really appreciate the courage that we all have within us. But more often than not, we don't acknowledge that. And I must admit, prior to today's session, I was just writing down what are those moments where I really lean into courage. And I was surprised at what was coming up for me,
Oh,
because
really?
so often we forget. And these are little things from childhood, from, falling off a horse and getting back on a horse, or falling off the motorbike. I grew up on a farm and getting back on the motorbike. But it's that courage, not only in how we live our life, but, how it comes into every aspect of, business, relationships, health, wherever that comes into. So I'm excited to explore where we go today.
And do you know, that's so good you made that comment, because in having all of these conversations, a lot of people go, oh my God, I don't realize how much of my life where courage has shown up. It's like, wow, even just small things like if you get a meal and you don't like it, just saying to the waitress, this is not what I ordered, or it's cold. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, that can be courage, but
Yeah.
we don't look at it like that. So, oh, can't wait to hear what your stories are, especially you've now just given us a snippet about growing in up on a farm and getting back on a horse. So certainly we'll go there. Before we do find out more about your courage story, though, could you just share a little bit about who you are and what you do for your work?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a certified money coach and also a money mindset mentor. So essentially, I've been in the finance industry for over 18 years. And I was a financial advisor. And during that time, a lot of the work that I did, you'd hear these, or you'd see these patterns with clients that they'd come in and they'd sort of essentially walk in the door and say, here's all my financial mess. And I was one of those advisors that was like, okay, great, here is it. It was all about how do you empower the client rather than really step into a place of rescuing them, because that's not what we're here to do. And so often when you caught up with clients, some would, go with the plan, and they were, achieving their results. And then some would come in and they'd be going, and doing random things. And it's like, oh, okay, what's coming up for you? So it was really starting to, invite and explore a little bit more into the psychology and the behavioral patterns of why they were doing what they were doing. And then that essentially led into me starting to study to be a life coach, and then, be, certified financial coach, certified money coach. And now I help really a lot of professional women to transform their relationship with money. But not only professional women, I work with couples and men, but I love helping women because I see that is where the biggest gap is. There's such a lack of courage or a lack of confidence with regard to money. And I think that has essentially been embedded by a lack of, not being taught about money, whether in the home environment or school, and helping them to step into building that confidence, the courage to lean into, being okay to earn money, being okay to manage money, being okay to, make more money.
Mm. And I know I have sat through one of your beautiful 3-day free sessions. And yeah, I've had 30 years in this industry and done a lot of work around my mindset and the nervous system. And I got so much gold out of those 3 sessions with you, because you looked at it from a perspective that I had never seen before or thought about before. Like there's just something special about what you do that, yeah, in your title, it doesn't capture really the value that you do bring to the table. And I love how, though, you got here by virtue of being a financial planner, which of course is far more practical left brain in that kind of bucket, but
Yeah.
were able to take all of that, observe what was actually going on at a deeper level. Now, really move what you're doing into that relationship side. Because if you get that bit right, you can learn the mechanics, can't you? You can get on top of the technical stuff. But that's
Yeah.
really where the core is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's a beautiful blend of the mind, body, spiritual, and practical side, and
Yeah.
you can't have one without the other. That's the blend, and I think holistically, when I work with clients, it's about how do you transform your relationship with money, and that
Mm.
then spreads out into other areas of your life. We don't really appreciate sometimes, or we often underestimate how big an impact financial stress can have on every area of our life. And when we can start to lean into finding a more harmonious, more joyful relationship with money, it reflects, in every aspect of our life.
Oh, so true, so true. So I now need to know more about you. We
Yeah.
understand that you do that work, but we need to understand who is Suzanne Alexander. So when is a moment in your life, and I don't care how far back you've got to go or if it was yesterday, where you've had to really reach in and find some courage?
Yeah, look, I have two that come to mind, but I'm going to go to an earlier one, which
Yeah.
was, I grew up on the farm. I had a great upbringing. I had a beautiful home environment, but I also experienced childhood trauma. And so I remember being, very much a people pleaser, very much, I guess, in a way, scared, sitting in fear. There was a lot of guilt and shame and so forth associated with that. And I remember when I really leant into courage was before my 21st birthday. I went overseas to New Zealand on a first holiday. And then a couple of years later, I moved overseas. I moved to Scotland for a couple of years or 2 years. And then I moved on to Canada for a year. And for me, that was a big leap of courage to really go, hang on, there's more to life rather than staying in this place of comfort and, getting consistency of income and, security of being close to family and friends. It was really, I had a strong pull just to leave and explore what was out there.
Oh, wow. So can I just go back? You've just touched on something that really, really connected with me, the people pleasing bit.
Yeah.
So can you talk about that? And you said childhood trauma.
Mm.
Was that because trauma is, as I've learned over the years, trauma is all different things. It's not
Yeah.
just the big, bad, ugly stuff. For you, was it big, bad, and ugly, or was it just small stuff? Because I know people pleasing can be very much a part of some of that trauma that we almost think, oh, that's nothing.
Yeah.
But yet, the way that it plays out in our lives, it is something.
It is, and for me, it was a big trauma or big
Okay.
hit,
Yes.
and so for a lot of my life, I didn't actually tell anyone about that. I only started to address it when I came back from overseas in my mid-20s and hadn't realized, and I think one of the things is that you do go into a people pleaser, from a female's perspective. For a lot of women that I speak to, and I know personally myself, is that generally when you grow up, the young girl is to be sort of seen, not heard. And I had an environment that wasn't the case in the home environment, but societally and in the community, a lot of women or young children, particularly females, are brought up. That's how it's all about how you look. And so it's the people pleaser, and I was very much played into that role. We had a large family dynamic. My dad is one of six siblings, I think six siblings. If I've got that wrong, I apologize. And so when you went into that environment, it was all about how you showed up versus how the boys show up. And for me, I'm a twin. Now I've got a twin brother. So if you look at that dynamics, it was like how he showed up and sort of, I guess, what was perceived to be normal versus how I showed up and what was perceived to be normal. So the people pleaser role was really, I guess, a protector mechanism. But for me, it was all about, and I'm still in that, I love to help people. And so I just thought that was part of that, but essentially when you delve into it, and I'm sure you can experience
Mm,
this, Kim, sometimes
mm.
it's at your own detriment.
I completely agree with you. I used to
Mm.
wear it like a badge of honor that
Yeah.
I'm just such a kind human that wants to please everyone else. However, as you get older and you suddenly realize that that was what you used to keep you safe from something else, not consciously, because back then you didn't realize it, that it's not a badge of honor and it's actually not healthy for you or for anyone else. Because you said earlier, when you were a financial planner, it was about trying not to rescue people.
Mm.
And I know that as a people pleaser, that's a big part of what you try to do. You try to help everybody, every stray dog, every human
Yeah.
that's got a wound. You want to get in there and fix it. And that doesn't help them and it doesn't help you. So, yeah, that's really interesting. So, why then, if I can just jump ahead, why did you go? So, you went on a family holiday to New Zealand, was it?
I actually just went with a relative. It was just, I'm going on a holiday, and she came similar age. So we went
Yes.
over there just prior to my 21st birthday. And then when I came back, I realized actually something had been ignited, that I just wanted to explore the world.
Oh,
And bless my mum, she was all supportive until probably about, a couple of months out. And she's like, "You're not going." Like any mother,
yep.
they want to wrap you up in a, cotton wool. But for me, it was all about, I knew that I was holding myself back and that something needed to change for me to really experience life.
How did you know that? How did that show up for you?
Yeah, it was instinctual. But also I think it was more, because of the childhood trauma, I hadn't been in, any relationships. And I kept myself so hidden, even though I didn't realize it, but instinctually or intuitively, I just knew I needed to get into a new environment where I felt like I could be myself, like I could be who I really wanted to be.
Mm.
And the idea of no one knowing me, coming from a country town, everyone knows everyone. Coming from that environment, I just wanted to be in a place where no one knew me. I could act as I wanted to be and not feel judged, which
Mm.
in all my learning is that was just the judgment I was putting on myself rather than what
Yeah.
I was perceiving.
So I've asked this question of others who have done this travel overseas because I did the same thing too.
Yeah.
You could have just say moved to Perth. Right?
Yeah.
Why
It's
did you go to Scotland?
funny you say that. So at the time, my best friend's sister was in Scotland, and I'm Scottish heritage, Scottish, English, Irish, and I remember, okay, great, there's safety. I'll go there. And then it was funny because we were going to do all this travel, and she left within a couple of months for various reasons. And I was just like, well, I'm over here now, the flight over, and you know what that flight is. I mean, I got off the plane. I'm like, I'm never getting back on there. So I'm never going to see my family again because that flight was so terrible. And we're talking 20 plus years, which is, changed now. But I remember just going, oh, I just can't see myself getting back on that flight. And when I got to Scotland, it was almost a feeling of, oh, I'm home. There's a sense of just familiarity with regard to that. And, for anyone who hasn't explored that, our genealogy and our genetics, really do provide us with insights in terms of when we delve into, and I'm very much someone who feels, feels energies and feels, a lot of emotions that come up. And I think just that connection to knowing that this was somewhere that we'd come from and loving the history, loving all of the architecture that Scotland had. And so, yeah, so I loved living there for the 2 years I was there for.
Oh, wow. And so that gives me the answer to why Scotland.
Mm.
So what did you do while you were there for 2 years?
Well, I actually worked for hospitals in administration, and then and I'd come from a medical secretarial role in Melbourne, and so I thought, well, that was the easiest thing to do, and that was amazing. That gave me so much exposure to life, but also my mum was a nurse, so I was familiar with the medical environment, and it gave me a level of security and grounding with regard to being in that environment. One, because it was familiar, but also the people that I then met. And if you think about the medical industry, it's a service industry.
Yeah.
So you have people that were probably similar in I guess, a kind of way, in that they were people pleasing, they were of service.
Mm,
And now, knowing now the difference, it's not about people pleasing. Yes, you can be of service, but it's not necessarily always putting yourself last. But that
mm.
was a great step into being an environment I felt safe whilst in a
Mm.
foreign country, and then allowing myself to just really open up.
That's what I was going to ask. So you said that you knew you were holding yourself back.
Mm,
What did you learn about yourself in that 2 years in Scotland that I guess that's kind of why you left? Or if anything,
yeah.
like, did you learn nothing? That can also be an answer. Yeah.
Yeah, look, for me, I think one of the things is it allowed me to know that I could speak up for myself, that I could advocate for myself, that I could keep myself safe. There was a lot of nights where I used to walk home from the pub by myself, but I was constantly aware. So for me, it actually built confidence, and that courage bit came back into it, because there was so many times where I put myself in situations, I love adventure. So whitewater rafting, throwing myself out of plane, and skydiving or rock climbing or ice climbing. All of those experience really proved to myself that I had the courage and I had the confidence to do this,
Mm.
and not continually ask for permission or not ask for someone else's interpretation, because I came from a place of I did not trust a single decision that I made. Every decision I made, I'd outsource and check, oh, what do you think of this? And it used to be so common. And then people would say, why do you feel a need that you need
Yeah.
to ask? And not realizing I just didn't have any trust. And so when
Mm.
I came back from overseas, it was for me, it was a new beginning, because suddenly I could
Mm.
advocate for myself. Suddenly I could start trusting myself. Now, that's been an ever evolving process, because I
Yes.
think you go
Yes.
deeper in terms of the trust, but definitely overseas, I think it's one of those experiences, because you are outside your comfort zone, you are away from family and, for a lot of the time, friends. It makes you step up in a way that you might not do if you were, staying in the comfort of your community.
Oh, absolutely. So why did you leave?
So I left because we had a 2-year visa,
Yes.
and then I went
Process.
straight to Canada, because that was the next stop off, and another English speaking country. I guess a level of safety. I did my 12 months in Canada and worked at a ski resort, which I absolutely loved. Met
Oh,
some amazing people. Did the typical shared house with a bunch of Aussies and Americans. And just had an amazing time. And that's the other thing, is you are coming into a place where you don't know anyone, and
mm.
you're in that period, you build some amazing connections and friendships that you wouldn't have experienced if you were just merely there on holiday.
And do you know what's interesting? Just I've had quite a number of guests on that have done the same thing as you've experienced. I did the same thing, like I said. And often the ones that have done this are the ones that, if you look back at the school years, are the ones that would be least likely to do it, because they
Mm,
were the shyer ones or the quieter ones or the more reserved ones. Yet
yeah,
those that have been more sort of out there and more extroverted, who you would think would just go off and, take risks and travel the world, they haven't been. This is a really interesting theme that I'm seeing come through. But
yeah,
I'm loving that in doing this was what you needed to really come out of your shell
yeah.
and to give you that confidence and trust, self-trust. That's a massive one.
Yeah, I think
Why?
that
Yeah, you go.
I was just going to say, I think for a lot of people, and it's
Mm,
you say that, and you're right. When I think of people that I've spoken to, and when I lived with
mm.
people overseas, a lot of it was like, actually, I needed to get into an environment no one knew who I was.
Yeah.
And I think when you reflect, I didn't even question moving interstate. I didn't even think of that. Why would you go 4 hours when you can go 24 hours away?
Yeah, yeah.
It was interesting when you put it like that, because I think it was that change of scenery, but
Mm.
culturally for me as well, it was change that environment and
Yeah.
change the results that you get.
Yeah, wow, and you thought like this when you were 21.
Mm. Yeah.
What were you like at school, can I ask? What
I
kind of
was the shy one.
boy?
I wasn't the outspoken one. I remember in primary school, I outspoke against a teacher, and even though all my friends were like, "Yay, go for you!" I felt an incredible level of shame and guilt for doing so. And so if anything, I went back into my hole. So
Mm,
I really, when I was younger, I had bat ears. So I had big ears. I've since had them pinned back. And so I experienced some, comments with regard to that. And so that overlaid on the other trauma that I experienced, it made me want to hide, and it's
mm.
something that I still continue to deal with today. It's like, the about looks and also how I show up and when I show up. It's still amazing how some of this commentary that
Mm.
can occur in childhood or teenagehood really carries through into our adult lives today.
And do you know what's fascinating is, and again, this is something I've been learning over the years and on my own journey though, is the things that seem so trivial back then
Yeah.
can still affect you today. And even the body piece one, like
Mm.
you said, it was your ears. For me, I've always had really big eyes and used to get called Google eyes. And
Mm.
I've always, even as a grown up, had been conscious. I don't like people looking at me from the profile view
Yeah.
because my eyes stick out. And it's so funny that it was something, yet every kid has got something little, and it doesn't mean that they carry it through,
Mm.
but something little that it does play out, saying, like I've just now you've made that comment. You've always got long hair that's over your ears. Is that part of it?
Not well, interesting you say that. I nearly wore my hair up today
Oh,
because when
okay.
I had my ears pinned back, I thought this is going to solve the confidence issues. And sure, it
Oh,
was great because I could put my hair up, and I used to play a lot of sport when I was a teenager, and so that was fantastic. But the confidence, it really didn't change. Like, I still had a huge amount of lack of confidence because, yeah, just one little cosmetic thing. And you hear that. And, used to work in an environment where people were getting, plastic surgery. And so often it was confidence driven or lack of confidence driven. Oh, if I, have a certain type of surgery, it's going to change everything. But if you don't do the inner work,
yeah.
and I think that exploration for me, without knowing anything about the inner world, when I
Yeah.
moved overseas, it intuitively was a pull to go, hang on, we need to explore this. And I think when you're taken outside your
Mm.
comfort zone, when you step into a level of courage, you are taken to an environment or to a level where you have to explore what's going on internally.
Oh, absolutely. Couldn't agree more with you on that one. So, when you left Canada, did you come back home to Melbourne?
I did. I
And did you
came
go back
back.
to the country?
No, I came back to the city, and it was funny. I said to a girlfriend, my intention was to come back, make some money, and then go and travel around South America. And I said to her, I have a feeling, a strong feeling I will get back into Australia. I'll get back into the security of earning an income.
Mm.
I'll go back into the stability of wanting to buy a property, and I won't travel. And it's exactly what happened. It's amazing what your words and thoughts and
Mhm.
how that can manifest. And the reality is that's exactly what happened. I came back, I got a secure job, I started to build from scratch. I came back with debt that I needed to repay, and really started to build a level of security in terms of saving for a deposit to buy a home. And it's amazing how that level of security, that level of
Mm.
comfort can have a really strong pull. Even though I had an absolute passion for travel and adventure, I would still do that, but it was on a holiday base rather than I'm going to continue living and traveling around the world.
Yeah, totally get that. Why property?
So for property, for me, it was the stability. And we know in Australia, for a lot of people who don't know, property is seen as the go-to. If you can have a place to live and you're not at the beck and call of landlords that can change the rent on you, or suddenly you're in a state that you have been kicked out because they either want to up the rent or sell the property. For me, it was a level of stability and having a place that I could call home. You know,
Mm.
I this place that I bought, for me, it's like my cave. You know, when I walk in the door, doesn't matter when it is, and I've lived here for a while now. For me, it's that sense of security. It's home. And I
Mm.
think that's the thing for me. Coming from a country, my parents still live in the family home. It's coming back to a place that I can call home and completely be myself. Mm.
Oh, how beautiful. Oh, how beautiful. Okay, that makes sense. So, how did you then, or was this the secure job that you had? Was that in financial planning? Like I was going to say, how did you then get
No.
into financial planning?
Yeah, interesting, because when I came back, I went back into medical secretarial
Right.
work, and I
Oh,
had this inkling that this wasn't for me anymore. I'd done my jobs, I'd done my apprenticeship, and I really wanted to get into finance. So I actually moved into a role in I worked for a mining company which got bought out, and then I moved into an accounting firm and worked for them. And then I moved into investment banking and I worked for the same guys that had done the takeover in terms of the mining company that I worked with BHP that got bought out. Western Mining I used to work for, and then they were taken out by BHP or taken over. So it was almost like a full circle. And then one of the things that really hit home when I started to work for the investment banking and the accounting firm was no one's going to come and rescue me with regard to my finances. Like, no one's going to, come along and suddenly it's all going to be okay. I was living in a bit of a daydream. I'd still had significant debt from when I was living overseas. And it was almost like that opportunity to go, I've got to pull my big pants on and really take responsibility here. So I started studying finance when
mm,
I was in the investment banking support role. And then part of that resulted in me choosing then to go into wealth management. And then part of that, we moved firms with the team that I was part of, was making a call to really explore, do I want to move into a broking role, or do I want to move into a financial advising role? And for me, it was, I want something more holistic that really looked at the big picture, not just at the
mm.
investment side. And so that was my venture into financial planning. It was spurred on from a belief that I needed to learn myself, and by learning myself, I could then guide and show others.
So you made a comment when I asked, how did you get into that? You said, I was interested in finance, or I wanted to get into finance. Why was that?
I think it came from security, because
Security.
the
Yep.
reality was I
Yeah.
had no idea how to manage my finances. My
Yeah.
sister put me on a budget, thankfully, and she taught me how to do a budget. And so that was really the only inroads. And that was
Yeah.
at a time there was a couple of finance books around,
Mm.
not definitely nowhere near the information that we
Yeah.
have at the moment.
Yeah.
And for me, it really was, if I don't learn it, then it's likely I'm going to stay in the same position I'm in, which wasn't one that I was overly enamored with. If I
Yeah.
don't learn it, then you can either choose to stay here, or you can choose to go off and invest in your knowledge, invest in yourself, and really transform your life.
How old were you when you did this? So how old were you when you
So this
had
would have
these
been mid
conversations?
20s. I would say about 26, I started delving into the finance area.
Yeah, which is interesting because a lot of 26-year-olds might acknowledge that they don't know this stuff,
Yeah.
but they're okay spending still. They
Yeah.
don't need to go and then work in the industry or teach themselves. But it's interesting that you've connected finance with security,
Mm.
and that no one's going to rescue you. Were you a bit of a dreamer? Were you a bit of a kind of like fairy tale knight in shining armor kind of girl when you were growing up?
Absolutely.
I say
Who
that because
doesn't
I'm
love a
like,
good Disney fairy tale that, Prince Charming's gonna come along and,
yep,
sweep you off your feet, and you're gonna
yep,
end up with a white picket fence. And look, from a country girl perspective,
yeah,
that's really embedded. Like, I mean, a lot of, my relatives have gone off, married, had children, and
Mm,
they're living that, what I would say is that typical life, and it's a
mm,
beautiful life. But I
mm,
constantly had this pull for there's something more, there's something else. And I guess that was the pull for moving from the country to the city, from the
mm,
city or Melbourne City overseas, and then overseas coming back and changing careers. It was, I think you can really relate to this, Kim,
mm.
knowing what I know of you, is that there's always something better.
Yeah. But it's interesting knowing it versus going and doing something to
Yeah.
find out what it is, because so
Mm.
many know it, but they spend their life knowing it, and that's where it stops.
Yeah. Yeah.
You went and did so that. So when you were a little girl, or as you were growing up, and particularly maybe more in your teenage years,
Mm.
so you've got this idea of the knight that's going to come and rescue you and all of that. Was part of, in your mind, the whole I've got to then get married and have kids? Like, was that part of your
Well, I
dream,
just
or?
assumed that would happen.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
for me, what I hadn't realized is I basically put a barrier around myself because of what had happened in childhood. It was,
Mm,
I almost repelled relationships, and the relationships that I did get into weren't healthy, which is often the way when you experience trauma. That I just came to this place of going, I was so fiercely independent too as a child,
mm,
that it really was the inspiration for me to learn this information. And if someone came along, fantastic, it'd be, a bonus, it would be, I'd still know how to do this. And this is what really, led to me in terms of, I spoke about there was two significant events. And
mm,
the other significant event was my husband was diagnosed with cancer in 2021. And I remember I had literally just stepped away from financial advising
mm,
uh, about 2 weeks prior to this. And I remember at the time he was diagnosed, and we're like, yeah, for me, it was like, no, no, he doesn't have this. And then we turn up to the appointment, and they're like, yeah, you've got this non Hodgkin's lymphoma. And I remember walking out, and there was so many emotions coming up, but my first reaction was, I'll go back and work, because I was so fiercely independent. I was so focused towards supporting him and knowing I could, because
mm,
I knew how to manage money, which,
mm,
I still do. But also I knew how to make money. So it was never the world is coming down on me. And I see that with a lot of women that I've worked with over the years, where either they've gone through a separation, or unfortunately, a partner has passed on, and suddenly they have no clue what to do. For me, it was, I was stepping into my superwoman power and going, great, I'm going to take back over control. And, I can do this. And it was at a point that my husband was like, no, we were looking at, we are actually going through fertility treatment, which is why I stepped back from financial advising for a period. And he goes, no, we can do this. I can still work, and we'll just navigate this. And it was at that time that I actually made the choice to do what I'm doing today.
Oh my gosh. So, oh wow, what a supportive husband. You certainly,
Yeah.
yeah, chose well. That you've stepped away because of fertility treatment. You wanted
Yeah.
to give yourself the best chance. 2 weeks later, your husband gets diagnosed with cancer.
Hmm.
So you, natural reaction, got to go back and work, got to support
Yeah.
him and us financially. And he's like, no, but that wasn't your dream.
Yeah.
That, oh wow, that's, I see why that's the second moment when you had to really reach in and find courage. So what did you do, knowing that your husband's, did you have kids at this point? No,
No, so we
sorry,
don't
you
have
just started
children.
fertility treatment.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so we
sorry,
don't
yeah.
have children. One of the things at that point was, okay, so my husband continued to work as much as he could during that period. For him, that was a decision he wanted to do.
Yeah.
And during that period, I actually went back and started studying, as you do when you're trying to go through, fertility treatment. I was studying to be a certified financial coach. I was finishing a life coaching
Yes.
qualification as well. But part of it was the healing process that I was experiencing doing that at the time. And that's when I realized this was the missing gap. This was the missing gap that I had been looking for, not only for myself, but my clients. You know how you go with the lens, oh, yeah, it's all about my clients. But the reality is, everything I do and teach, I've gone through it because I need to know that it works at some level, and that's me, at my level, for me to know that I can share that and guide another client through it.
Isn't this interesting that you've left the fertility treatment?
Mm.
You're also gone down the whole life coaching, money coaching path. And this is actually giving you the healing that you needed
Mm.
at the same time. And can I ask, did the fertility treatment work?
It didn't. So it was one of those things, because my husband's cancer is a blood type cancer. I
Yeah.
remember going through, a period where we kind of had to make a call of where do we go with this, because we went through a exercise where his blood was actually taken, and it was put through a process, and then it was infused into myself. And I remember at that time going, am I that desperate to have a baby that I would put potentially cancerous blood into my body to have a baby? Even though when I asked the doctor, the specialist, he goes, no, 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 it's all fine. It's obviously being stripped out. But I remember when they were transfusing the blood into me, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is the length that I would go
Yeah.
to have a child. And unfortunately, it didn't work. But part of that learning for me was there is such a bigger purpose for me. And that's where I continually get pulled. And if I'm tuning in, and for anyone who doesn't like woo woo, I do, and very much come back in to recognizing who I am and what is my power in terms of my resilience and my grit, my courage. And the reality is, I would go to, pretty extreme lengths to ensure outcomes. And for me, when we made the choice not to continue with fertility treatment, there was a level of peace there, because I'd gone through nearly every experience you could
Mm.
to have a child. And for me, it was like, you know what? That's okay. I'm
Yeah.
happy with what effort I've put in. I think
Yeah.
that's where it can be hard for people that have
Yeah.
experienced fertility challenges, because they get to a point, it's like, we haven't tried everything. And
Yeah.
for me, there was just a sense of, that's okay. Our life, there's another direction we're being guided on.
That's so interesting. Thank you for sharing that. I was actually listening to a podcast this morning, and it's a guy that he actually is a high performance coach that coaches the mindset around those that, like, athletes that go to the Olympics, like at
Mm,
that level. And he was sharing a story about a woman who, it was all about, winning this marathon that she was training for. And then she had that shift where she suddenly realized that is in my way. The desire to win it is actually getting in the way. I need to look at the experience and how it makes me feel. But most importantly, I need to know that regardless of the outcome, I did absolutely every single thing that I could
mm.
to get me to the point where I could give it my best shot.
Yeah.
And it's exactly what you've just said then, that the peace that came from knowing you gave it everything you could, it's not the outcome you necessarily wanted,
Mm,
but you gave it that is, it's funny that you said the peace because when I introduced you, I get such a level of calm and peace when I'm in your presence.
mm.
It's quite beautiful.
Thank you.
And can I ask, I'm assuming your husband is cured or is okay?
Yeah, so he's having regular check-ins, and everything's
Yes.
going well at the moment. So thank you. But it was interesting, because that whole period, and this was all during COVID,
Oh,
which, if anyone's not familiar, in Melbourne we're essentially locked down for 2 years. And so for us, it was also a period that really, I mean, again, it took our level, our relationship to a deeper level. He's one of my greatest advocates. I absolutely adore him. He's beautiful, and he's supported everything that I have done. So for us, it was again another experience to really lean into the bond that we had together, but
mm,
also to do another level of deeper inner work, because there obviously was regrets, not regrets. There was, yeah, probably it was regrets, that I also had to work through, even though I tried everything to ensure that I had that level of peace and calm there. But also
Yeah.
realizing too, and I'm not sure if you experience this, Kim, as you've moved from, finance into speaking and podcasting and coaching and everything that you do, when you leave a career, sometimes you lose your identity.
Yeah.
Like for me, my identity was I was a financial advisor.
Mm.
And then suddenly, this was something I was going to step out. I was going to study because I knew I found the life coaching, the certified financial coaching. So I knew I was going to do that. And then I was just going to step back into being a financial advisor and bring all this skill set. And then when I studied that, I realized actually this in itself, one, needs to be kept separate, but two, is so big
Mm.
that I want to have the capacity to have the time to sit with a client and unpack what's
Mm.
going on. And for
Mm.
me, there was also that identity loss of I'm not going to be a mother, identity loss around, well, I am to a gorgeous Labrador for mum. But,
What's her name?
I'm no longer a financial advisor. And so we talk about grief
Mm.
over loss of maybe a loved one or a pet that passes on, but there's also that grief around identity, and I don't think we speak a lot about that. And unfortunately, for a lot of people, that also holds you back
Mm.
in every area of your life as well, because you haven't processed the emotions that come with
Mm.
that.
I think identity is such a massive, massive, as you say, overlooked place for one for newness and for growth, but two, being able to say goodbye to one identity and step into another. That
Mhm.
there is that grief that you do go through.
Yeah,
It's actually a whole. I think I've told you I've got a book, and there's 3 sections of the book. One whole section is just on identity,
great. Yeah.
because I do believe, like, I see this so often, and I see people go, but this is who I am. And it's like, well, no, it's not who
Mm.
you are, it's what you do. But you're so attached to what you do that you've made it who you are.
Mm.
And to let go of that, even for the right reasons, yeah, there is a almost a grieving process that you've got to go through, and at that emotional level. And this is where I love that you do the whole mind body kind of integration. And if you don't do that properly, it's really, really quite traumatic,
Yeah.
even if it's by choice.
Absolutely, and that's the other thing, is because I chose to step away
Yeah.
knowing, and then I chose not to go back into that, and that's the big thing. I think, you know,
Mm.
we do underestimate that, and identity work also comes into the work I work with around clients, because so often we get caught up in, "This is who I am,"
Yeah.
and we forget about who we're becoming.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm.
Oh, and so this comes up in the work that you do with your
Yeah,
clients.
because
How
if you
does that
think
play
about
out?
Yeah, so if you think about your relationship with money, so often clients come in and they've got their own money story, their own money narratives. And so once we start to unpack that, that has formed part of that identity. And sometimes we do unpack and
Yeah.
discover that there's grief around, different losses of identity as part of that. And then it's really about, well, who do you want to be? Because the reality is, more often than not, our identity is, caught up in our subconscious mind, like those
Yeah.
patterns of beliefs and thoughts that we've been telling ourselves and really have been embedded by childhood. And
Yeah.
so what we can find is when we start to break into this new identity, and maybe it's being more responsible with money, or
Yeah.
really creating a life that you really want to live. Like I call it your abundant life. Like let's live your abundant life now, and planning so you can keep enjoying it in the future. But for a lot of people, that takes a new identity shift around what you're telling yourself. What
Mm.
are the words you speak out loud? What are you thinking? What are the beliefs that are coming up for you? And so when we can start to change your identity and lean more into, well, how do you want to operate? It's really also not only how you do that, but also being aware of your networks around you, whether that be family or friends or
Mm.
work colleagues, whoever that will also be categorizing you as your old self,
Yeah.
And so it's establishing a new framework of who are you now? That's who you
Mm,
used to be, but
mm,
who are you now? So you can set boundaries so that you can clarify and really own,
mm,
stepping into that confidence, which is the courage piece to say, hey, that's
mm,
who I used to be. And, thank you for keeping me safe and protecting me, that is part of that. But who am I really wanting to step into? And I think it goes back to what really I probably got an insight into in my early 20s when I lived overseas, and
mm,
has just kept flourishing as I've grown and coming into, where I'm at the moment, and
mm,
really going, you know what? I'm really stepping into this level of experience and wisdom and knowledge, and
mm,
everything that I bring to this world as an individual, I'm
mm.
owning it.
Oh, that is so powerful. Oh, Suzanne. Oh my goodness. So who are you becoming right now?
So for me, it is honestly, I am, if you're anything into human design, I'm a projector, I'm a 6-2 profile. I am here to guide and lead. And for me, that resonates so strongly. I absolutely love learning. Anyone who knows me will know that I love a good course. I'm always studying because for me, it's the growth internally, but it's also my ability to be able to, just unpack and bring the best of together. Like, how can I simplify? And that's why I love about, finance. Like, how can I simplify this? I don't want anyone to be sort of in front of a computer all day, every day, looking at numbers. It's like, how do you unpack that? How do you align it to your values? How do you build something out that really supports you and can be automated? But for me, it's about really stepping into surrendering, really trusting myself,
Mm,
and really honoring every part of who I am and what I bring to the world, and acknowledging that no matter what goes on around me, what can I really control and what can I be in charge of and what can't I? And so it's setting up really strong boundaries around who I allow into my world, what information I allow into my world as well. Because I think we can get so caught up. One of the big things, I see happen, and I say that personally, is that there's a real victim culture at the moment.
yeah.
Every client I've worked with has experienced trauma. Um, but the reality is, you can either choose to stay in that trauma and the narrative, or you can choose to actually step out of that. And for me, it's leading by example so that I can be a guide for others to go, hey, if she's done that and she's experienced this sort of life, why why can't I?
Oh, yeah.
Mm.
Oh, that is so powerful. And just on that note on the human design, I'm actually a manifesting generator, but my profile's 6'2".
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. So, the role model hermit. Anyone who doesn't
Yep.
know human design won't have a clue what we're talking about. That's okay. Those who do, hence now that explains, yeah, quite a bit of our similarity in that respect.
Yeah.
Um, but that's so beautiful that you're living the whole role model piece so beautifully. You even just said that before, that with the work that you're doing, it's almost like you're testing it out on yourself.
Mm.
You're then taking it on and embracing it. So you are absolutely the epitome of what a role model is.
Mm.
You're not just doing stuff. You do, but you've got that beautiful knowledge from being a fully qualified financial advisor to then couple with this beautiful, um, the human stuff. Like, this
Mm.
is the stuff I see missing from that industry,
Yeah.
is the human stuff. And you just do it, and you don't even just do it at that level. You also go into the soul level and the more
Yeah.
spiritual, and that, which is such a beautiful, like the combination of all three.
Mm.
Oh, wow. So, yeah, so I get why certified money coach and money mindset mentor just does not do the justice to the work that you do. So, what's the next thing you've got to really reach in and find some courage for in any area of your life coming up?
Yeah, for me, I think it's a deeper level of confidence,
Yeah.
it's showing up in a way. I am an introvert. We talk about the hermit. I literally rejuvenate and re-energize by being at home by myself, and just that's how I recharge. Some people recharge in a room full of people. I don't. So I can go to an event and then I'll come home and feel like I've been out all night. And so for me, it's really starting to step into a place of, you know, showing up in a way that allows me to be able to voice to other people what is possible and be that guide. Show
Mm,
people that, you can come from different lifestyles or different environments, different circumstances, but you can still create your abundant life. A lot of the time when I work with clients, it all comes down to, oh, but I'll live that when. And my focus is really stepping in and living this life that you want to live now, but
yeah.
planning for the future. And when you start to unpack that, so it's, there's a component of numbers that come into that. But when you start to go and do the deeper inner work, when you get to know who you truly are and you really come back to yourself, that's when you start to realize actually it doesn't always come down to external,
Mm,
entertainment or things that cost a huge amount of money. I posted the other day,
mm,
I was back at my parents and they've got koalas in their garden. And it was actually just being back in nature, to be back in a place where your nervous system settles and you're
yeah.
calm. And it's going back to that childlike curiosity and wonder and
Mm,
really appreciating everything we have, but
mm,
bringing that into your daily lifestyle. So living in a place of joy, resetting joy as being the new normal rather than sitting in a place of frustration or fear or whatever's
mm,
coming up for you. I think we really need to, as a society and as a community, flip that. That
mm.
if you're not sitting in a place of joy and happiness, why aren't we? Because that's essentially how we were born. We've just flipped the dynamic as we've grown up.
I completely agree. What you mentioned that we're very much in a victim mentality mode at the
Mm.
moment. Do you think that's more so than in the past?
I do, and I think it's largely driven by a level of awareness, but also social media. One of the
Yeah.
things that I see is, when I experience, my events in childhood, I didn't tell anyone and I just got on with it. And I'm not saying that is how we should be treating that, because I think there's a lot of benefit with regard to seeking support and assistance and getting the guidance to process a lot of this. But what
Mm,
I do see is that a number of people get a lot more staying in that state than they do in getting out of that state. And a lot
mm,
of the time it comes down to a place of maybe not being aware of what's on the other side and fearful of what's on the other side. And
mm.
so, one of the things is, and I love Elizabeth Duckworth. She's got a book about grit. She's also got a TEDx speak
Yes.
about grit and resilience. Is how can we actually take self-responsibility for how we live our lives and the actions
Mm,
that we take and the thoughts that we think and the words that we use, rather than feeling that we're a victim of our circumstances, our environment, our culture. Because the reality is, when we can step into self-ownership, self-responsibility, we can choose. And that's, something that comes back into what I teach, which is, really stepping into a place of confidence, clarity, and ultimately choice with how
mm,
we show up day to day. Because the more we lean into that, the more that we can choose to grow and
mm.
expand our level of awareness, expand our way of thinking, and obviously change the outcomes and results that we're achieving.
So true, so true. So what scares you about this next phase then, about going deeper? What scares you?
I think at the moment, I must admit, showing up.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
even having this conversation, I was saying to you before we jumped on the
Mm,
call, there was a bit of apprehension. And
mm,
probably I spoke about stuff that, well, I have spoken about stuff I have not spoken to anyone outside,
mm,
and on a public forum. But the reality is, when I came into this, I was saying to Kim before we started this call, Kim just has a beautiful way of allowing someone to open up and really just explore what is coming
mm.
through. And for me to step into a new place of being seen
Yeah.
is not just coming back to how I feel, but it's really recognizing that the more I can show up, the more I can support others to step
Mm,
into a place of courage. And so it's moving further away from ego and how it operates and keeps us safe, and really focusing on, well, how can I help others? So it's always going to come from a place of service. Yes, there's, I'm still, conscious that people pleasing will always come up, but putting boundaries in place. But ultimately for me, it is really showing through example or leading through example. Be the person you wish to
Mm.
be in the world, so that others can then see that they have an opportunity of hope.
Oh, that is absolutely beautiful.
Mm.
Oh, yeah. And do you know, there was a podcast, and I cannot remember now, and I wasn't prepared to share this, so I don't have the details. And the long and the short of it is that the highest frequency that humans can vibrate at is not even love.
Mm.
It's actually authenticity. And they've done this research, and I won't do the date, but I will put the details of this podcast in the show notes because it's absolutely beautiful. So even when you talk about showing up, it's not showing up in a, well, look at me, how good am I kind of thing. It's showing up, being true to who you are, and with that authentic piece, supporting you. But
Mm.
yeah, that is scary, right? Because it needs courage, but that's vulnerability.
Yeah.
But so I get where the scare is, but I also get where the place is that you're coming from and why that's going to be so beautiful.
Yeah.
Because by showing up, more people are going to be able to tap into the gifts that you bring to this world, which are just glorious.
And I think that's, absolutely what you bring to the party as well, Kim, in that there's that level of vulnerability, even with what you've shared over the years and
Mm.
what you continue to share. And I think that's where a lot of people underestimate. I know myself, when I really hear someone that is stepping into a place of vulnerability, for me, there's like that connection is built,
Yeah.
because you feel like you are just having a cup of tea or cup of coffee or
Yeah.
with, a friend. And I think that's what, the more that we can, because the reality is, particularly for women,
Mm.
if we can really own this level of vulnerability as a superpower,
Yeah.
because that is the beauty. We have this, we were talking about feminine, masculine energy before this call, but there's feminine, masculine energy with regard to money as well. And
Yeah.
if we can get really vulnerable with regard to who we are, we do the deeper inner work, we can start to play in these, polarities of feminine and masculine. But it's honoring too that the
Mm.
beauty is that they work so well together, and
Mm.
it's just honoring how that can help us build this most amazing life that we want to step into.
And that's the thing I think that has shocked me over the last years since leaving being exclusive to financial services is the understanding of the energy. And as you talk about the feminine and masculine, but in particular, how that energy also applies to money. Like
Mhm.
they do not teach you that when you are doing finance degrees
No.
and learning that side of it. It's like, but that piece
Mm.
is such a huge component that we're not coupled into the more practical and the left brain and more of the masculine. It's not the whole puzzle is not being completed.
No,
So it's
and I think that's
yeah.
interesting. Even when I speak to finance
Mm.
professionals now, some are starting to step into that, which is
Yeah.
absolutely amazing. I'm loving
Yeah.
seeing that. And then
Yeah.
some, there is just a real strong disconnection. But part of that is because they haven't stepped into their own level of vulnerability. And you and I both know, we've both done personal, a
Yeah.
lot of personal development work,
Yeah.
that if you're not prepared to go there, how can you, expect someone else to? And that's why
Yeah.
whenever I work with clients, it's, I'm like an open book. There is nothing really that will shock me,
Yeah.
because I know the deeper work that I've done, that
Yeah.
I've even been surprised by, but I
Yeah.
know the transformation and power in doing that work and what's on the other side.
Totally. And again, it goes back to you being the role model that, role models do it themselves and then they role model that behavior. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
oh my gosh. Oh, Suzanne, we could seriously talk forever. If someone does want to know a bit more about you, about the work that you do, follow along, obviously I'll put the details in the show notes, but where should they head? And is there anything that you've got that they could jump onto or learn about, to just give them a little bit more intel into some of the goodness that you bring to this world?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook. LinkedIn and Facebook, Suzanne Alexander, and then in LinkedIn, it's mindful_finances. Sorry, on Instagram. And also, I'd love to share today a money story workbook. So you can download the workbook. You can go through these questions that are really going to start to evoke a level of understanding of your relationship with money. And it's a beautiful exercise to do as an individual, but also as a couple. If you
Mm,
think as a couple, you're coming in with two independent relationships with money.
yeah.
And if you think about it further, your parents and your grandparents. So we come into a relationship, and I would love to see this more. That when you go into a relationship, there is sort of a couple of sessions or work that you do that where you start to explore that dynamic, because we know that money is such a massive stressor in
Mm,
couples, where if you can start to bring compassion and empathy to your relationship with money and understand why you operate the way that you do, and bring harmony and direction into how you want to build wealth together,
mm,
it really does change every part of the relationship that you
yeah.
have. So by all means, please download the book. You can do that exercise in a quiet and safe environment, so that you can really explore. And it's a powerful way to understand, well, what am I really telling myself? How often do we question what we're telling ourselves or what our beliefs are about money?
So true. And I'll put the details in the show notes for you to go on, grab that link, get that resource, and really tap into some of the goodness that comes from understanding your relationship with money and your relationship with you and with life. Like as you say, it kind of, there's a flow on effect when you
Mm,
do this work that goes well beyond just your finances.
yeah.
Suzanne, absolutely loved it. Literally could have kept going, but thank you so much. I just feel so calm and relaxed. It's just, you always do this to me, but just sharing your story, getting to know you more. Like I didn't know a lot of what you shared, has been absolutely gorgeous. And I know that there will be people listening that will say, thank you for being brave and bringing what you just shared to the table, because it will impact so many people that you will never even realize what you've done. So
Thank you for
thank
having
you,
me.
thank you.
Thank you.